welcome back to the Queen Sessions podcast. My name is Ebony Harris.
And I'm Elisa Bokeen, and we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch. That's us.
Welcome back. That is us. It is just me and Elisa today. Last week we had our lovely team members, Danielle and Justin, for a really good conversation on just minority mental health, what we're doing to change the face of therapy, and also what we can do differently when it comes to minority mental health. So if you haven't caught that, go over to melaninmentalhealth.com, and it is the first blog post that's on there. It's the video and it's the audio. So if you want to do a podcast, like audio podcast, you can do that, or you can watch the YouTube video. That's where we post all of our podcasts. So make sure you're checking that out every week. We post them on there most Mondays. I usually do it on a Monday. Sometimes it's Monday night, but it gets on there on a Monday. So that's where you can check out. I feel like I'm like to the side. That's where you can check out that recent one. And so today we are going to talk about, I keep looking at myself, it's weird. Today we're going to talk about self-care for minorities. And so we talked about self-care a lot, obviously. I don't even know why I didn't wear my self-care sexy shirt. That didn't even cross my mind.
I know. Well, maybe because we was on the fly with this.
Right. I have my dope therapist shirt on that you can't see. And at least I love that shirt. I need to get one.
Therapists need therapy too. Yes, we do.
So we are talking about self-care because that's one of our favorite topics, obviously, but we want to talk about it as far as when we're triggered as minorities, how do we take care of ourselves? So I want to let Elisa kind of explain a little bit more what she was thinking about with this topic.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in the spirit of minority mental health, you know, what is it that we can do to begin caring for our mental health? And for some people, you know, maybe at this point in time, therapy is not an option. Or maybe they don't feel like they necessarily need to go to therapy. Although, you know, we talk about that all the time. Everybody can benefit from therapy because you don't have to be in crisis, right? But, you know, what you can start at, which really is the foundation for our mental health, is self-care. And, you know, you and I have talked about this before. We have a Melanin mental health, you know, post about, you know, self-care when the world feels unsafe, which for, you know, Black and Latinx communities, like it feels unsafe a lot, you know, and so how can we care for ourselves? And so the thinking behind it was, you know, how is it, you know, as a Latina, you know, what are some topics or what are some, you know, common themes that may be triggering for me because of my background, because of my ethnicity, because of my race, and how do we care for ourselves as a result of that?
Right. I think that's a really smart way to look at it because we talk about, you know, how it feels to be in this world as a minority, but to really pinpoint like these are the things that trigger us. And I know that so many other people are triggered by that. I think it's important to talk about that and then talk about how we handle those things. And I would love for the people that are watching in the chat, because this is a little bit easier to look at the chat while we're doing this, just so you know. But I would love for the people that are watching to also tell us when these things, we have a few things we're going to talk about, and when they come up, how do you take care of yourself? What are some tips you would give to somebody else regarding self-care when they're triggered by these events? So Elisa, what was your first one? I thought your first one was really good because it's so prevalent, right? Well, not prevalent, but it's just recent. And this is just like on people's mind right now that it's even happening.
So for me, the big one right now is, of course, the people who are, people who are coming over here and they're being separated from their families. You know, immigration is such a hot topic right now for this country. But, you know, it really takes on a different level when, you know, my family, you know, I come from a family of immigrants, you know, my parents are from Mexico, you know, and, you know, the interesting part to it is that adds a level of triggering is, you know, that whole notion of, you know, go back to your country and, you know, if you're going to come in here, you need to come in the right way, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, my grandfather was born in Buda, Texas. You know, you know, this Texas was at one point Mexico, right? And so that's kind of like, you know, the border we didn't cross the border crossed us, so to speak, right? So
Right.
that in
Right.
it of itself, like, is triggering because, that gets forgotten sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like my parents came over here. I was born in Illinois, but they came over here for the same reasons that so many of those people who are crossing over here right now and they're being separated from their families, um, because they wanted a better life, right? My parents didn't come over here thinking, well, what can I get over there and get? Like
Right.
my parents worked tirelessly their whole lives doing labor jobs. And so it's very triggering to me because um, I know what it's like to sort of live in that fear. I know what it's like to know that why your family would come over here. Um, my grandmother who would come back and forth between Mexico in the summers, she was coming over to work in the fields, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
she was doing the picking tomatoes and all of that sort of work. So the idea that immigrants there, or that people are coming over here from Latin countries solely, like with they're coming over here for a free ride, like that's very triggering. And then seeing the babies,
Right.
like seeing the babies separated, and then as a therapist knowing like what type of damage is being done, trauma, attachment, all of that. And I can't help, I'll have to speak, I can't help but feel like, oh, like that's very close to home. That could have been me. And I think about my own children,
Right. Right.
like what if I didn't have the privilege of being born here? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like they could have been born, my children, their father is Honduran and I'm Mexican, right? Like, so what if we would have been, um, what if we didn't have the privilege of having had them here?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I'm kind of rambling at this point, but yeah, that's very
No, yeah,
triggering.
it makes sense, and it's understandable why it would be triggering. And a big part of that is the demonization of certain countries,
Right.
because what I can't remember what he said because I pay very little attention to Trump, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I remember he said something shithole
Right.
countries
Right.
was
Right.
his statement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not immigrants, it's
Right.
immigrants from specific countries, and that's what makes it such a like messed up thing,
Right.
and well, it's messed up regardless. Let me say that.
Right.
No
Right.
matter what country they come from, if you treat them in a certain way and separating families and keeping kids in cages and all, that's
Right.
all completely unacceptable. But it also is that basically what it boils down to is brown countries shouldn't be coming here. Like
Right.
that's what it is. We're not so upset with the European countries or the people
Mm-hmm.
from those countries when they come over, but the brown countries, the countries with majority brown people, shouldn't be making their way over here.
Right. Right.
That's even more of an
Yeah.
issue and a trigger.
Yeah. It's like, how
Yeah.
do you, and then again, it's kind of like all these different perspectives that, like all these different parts of me, I'll speak for me, like all these different parts of me that do get triggered. There's a
Mm-hmm.
part of it where it's like where I'm the child that had the privilege of having more opportunities than my parents did,
Right.
like their education, like they were both came from extremely poor families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't look back and be like, oh, there's money in your background, like they're poor families where it was like working your ass off for very
Right.
little.
Right.
That was the way to be. So for my parents, their idea of like success was me working somewhere where there's air conditioning. And that could have been like
Mm.
it, like a bank teller,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
that was for them like
You've made it.
success, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like to have the privilege that I have and knowing like and seeing my parents how they worked, their whole lives. Um, that's my father. I've mentioned this before. He has Parkinson's disease, right? And so there's
Mm-hmm.
still a lot of um, like research around Parkinson's and what causes it. But one of the things that they've linked it to is the pesticides that were sprayed
Mm.
over people working in the migrant fields. So my
Wow.
father, when he would come over here, he was 12 years
Right.
old and he remembers, them spraying over there. So it's like, okay,
Wow.
you know what I'm saying? And then so
Yeah.
to then feel like, oh no, you're coming over here because you want a free ride. And I see my dad,
Hmm. Suffering
who
because of work he did.
right, as a child that my
Right.
grandmother would bring him. Why? Because she was a widow. Like sometimes,
Hmm.
oh, well, why are you bringing your children to work? Because they want to eat.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, they want to eat. And so my father was diagnosed when he was like my age, like 43 years old,
Wow.
and still worked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's so triggering to me that they come over here because they want a free ride, you
Right.
know.
Right. They want to steal stuff, or
Mhm.
they want the benefits without putting in the work, and
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to nope, they just want better. That's
They just
all. They
want better.
just
Like my parents were like, "Oh, we just want our kids to be able to not be working labor jobs."
yeah.
Like that was
Yeah.
it. Anything that I've done beyond that wasn't really even something that they conceived.
Right.
So, and then
Right.
again, to be a mother of brown children and then
Mhm.
to see these babies, that's really difficult.
Right. Right. So how do you handle that? How do you take care of yourself doing that
Ooh,
whenever you
well,
see the news
yeah.
or Facebook or whatever?
I try not to be honest, and not speaking from this point of privilege. It's like I
Mhm.
can't take in a whole lot of it. It's like I can't look at the images. I can't. I just can't. Like that's and again that's self care that I can do for me from a place of privilege where I don't where I can choose to not be inundated
Right.
by it.
Right.
Um, but it's that's one thing that I do. And then part of my self-care is having these conversations, right? Like to be able to speak to it from my perspective,
Mhm.
um, to just kind of give people another perspective. I realize that immigration is a really hot topic.
Right.
But this person that you see, like is a product of that.
Right. Right.
Hmm. And the
Uh,
other part I would say is just not engaging in conversations with people where it's like you don't really want to have a conversation so you can understand my perspective. You
yeah.
know?
Where they just want to like point out their stuff and then just not listen to anything you have to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That's
Mm-hmm.
uh pretty much my solution for most things. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, like I hear it, I know I'm aware, but I can't immerse myself in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because yeah, it'll take over.
It will
And
take
in
over.
order for me to do my job as a therapist, or in order for me to be healthy myself, like that's not something I can take in a lot. So I
Mm-hmm.
completely understand that.
Yep.
So I'll go into my triggering thing, which mine
Yeah.
is a little bit I want to say lighthearted, but it still bothers me and it still triggers me. Um,
It's
just
the
and probably because
microaggression stuff.
yeah, and it's probably just because I probably just never paid attention to it before, but like I feel like recently it's been happening a lot. And so for me, it is when a white person, a lot of times a white woman, but sometimes white men, uh, talk to me in like the hey girlfriend or the girl da 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 da, and like just it's it's so weird to me. Like I don't know. So when it happens, it takes me aback because I'm like, who are they talking? Because one, I don't talk like that. Two, my friends don't talk like that. And so when I hear anybody talk like that, I'm like, what? And then it turns into like a why did you have to change the way you talk to me? Like, why
Mm.
don't you talk to me like you talk to everyone else? And this is one of those moments of like, you know how people say I don't see color, or black people always bringing up race and that's one of those moments when it's like, oh yeah, I'm black, like because like you felt like you needed to act differently around me as opposed to just treating me like everybody else, which makes it clear that most people see color. Let's start there.
Well,
And go
yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say, and that you had that in order to relate to you, they had to act black.
Right, whatever their version
Whatever their version is of
of black
being
is.
black. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And a lot of times it's so random because it's like in passing, like I'm trying to think of the most recent time. It was pretty recent. Like I feel like it was when I was in Dallas this weekend. I think somebody like walked by me and was like, "Hey, girlfriend, something," and I was like, I don't know who she was. It was a stranger. She was just making a comment about wherever we were at. Maybe it was a food. I don't remember where we were at. But that. Why did you start with that? So that
why are you
like
the girlfriend?
Right. Or I've also had this is another one. I've had debates about music because somebody was playing like Hall and Oates. Let's say Hall and Oates. I'm in my early 30s. I mean, I'm real close to that, but I'm in my early 30s. Hall and Oates is just not my jam. It's just not. And so they were playing a song and I didn't recognize it. I lied. It wasn't Hall and Oates. It was
I was like, I like me some Hall and Oates.
It wasn't Hall and Oates. It was who are the people that sing rock? The Police.
Oh,
is that who sings Roxanne?
Yeah.
So obviously I know the Police. I know Roxanne. I know Sting, right? Look, I'm trying to make sure.
Right. Sting, yes.
So I know who these people are, but the song that they were playing, I did not recognize. Mm-hmm. And so, and I just thought about that. Anyways, so, and so I made the comment like, "Oh, what song is this?" Like, I don't know this song because they were like singing along, and I was like, "What song is this?" And so then it turns into this conversation like, "Oh, you don't know who they are? You only listen to NWA?" And I was like, "Wait, what?
Like, who was this? Where was this?"
Like that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it turned into this whole conversation about who do I listen to? I must only listen to rap music. I must only listen to da-da-da. And I was like, no.
Wow.
I don't know why you make that assumption. So things, and like, it turned into like, I had to like literally stop the conversation. A friend of mine had to like kind of push him out the way and be like, just let's stop this. Wow. And so things like that just seem, I guess, like normal conversation maybe.
Right.
It feels very like, it triggers me because you're making so many assumptions about me.
Right.
Based on what? And the one with the music is somebody that I've known for at least like 6 years. I mean, we're not close, but he knows who I am. We used to work together. Right. And so it was very much like a whoa. Like
Right.
Because I'm Black. You just assume that you know what my tastes are, or just because I didn't know who this particular song, because I knew who the group was, but I didn't know that song, you make a whole lot of assumptions about me. And of course, if I would have brought it up at the time, because I didn't, but if I would have been like, it's a joke. It's not that serious. We're just laughing. Right. And it was like, but that is sensitive to me because I hate people to make assumptions about me. That's just not my thing. But two, it's what is your thoughts about Black people? Like, I don't know. That just bothered me so much.
Well, and the fact that you knew him for a while, it's like, oh, so this is what you've been thinking like the whole time?
Yeah. And that wasn't the first incident either. So there is that. So I wasn't too surprised, but it still was like, it caught me off guard that was said. And so, those little things when people kind of make those comments, either talking differently or making assumptions about me as a Black person, it really does like irk me a little bit because I've been in situations with police where they treated me a certain way because of whatever thoughts they've had about me. Like I've had that experience. And so when someone else is basically saying like, oh, because you're Black, you're this, and this, or because you're Black, you talk like this and you act like this. And it's like, but I don't.
Right.
And even if I did, fine, no big deal.
Right.
But just like and this is the thing that I feel like I say a lot, just like every other culture, we're all mixed. We have different people. Right. And so just treat me just like you would treat everybody else. Because I treat you like I would treat everybody else. I'm not walking, I don't want to be offensive, so let me not go that far, but I'm not acting differently in different situations. So that's my triggering moment that I've had a lot.
Well, and I think what's underneath both of what you're saying and what I'm saying is that these assumptions that people make, most of the time they're inaccurate and some of them are actually quite dangerous, right? Like, so when you have a certain assumption of, oh, so you are coming here because you're a threat to us. You're coming here because you want to threaten my way of life.
Right.
You're coming here to take from me, right? If that's your assumption about me, how are you going to treat me as a result of that assumption? And
Mm-hmm.
so these micro thoughts of like, well, yeah, of course you listen to NWA because you're Black.
Mm-hmm.
No, there is no, of course, because I'm a Latina. There is no,
Right.
of course,
Right.
because, you know, whatever. Like there is no, of course, because I'm first generation. There is no, of course, because my parents came here from Mexico. There is no, of course. And when
Right.
you start to impose your, of course, even if it's something as minor as what you think my expectations should be in music, then what other, and you're that fixated on, no, that's how it
Right.
must be on
Right.
music. What else
Right.
are you
Are
fixated
you
on
assuming?
who and
Right.
who I am?
Mm-hmm.
And why aren't you
Mm-hmm.
interested in knowing who I really am?
Right. Right. And that brings me back to the conversation we had about like um, multicultural classes in college when we're getting our degrees or whatever. And I remember specifically we had like a week or two on race and ethnicity. And basically what we did was we read a chapter about a specific race and then we presented on that chapter. Like this is what typically happens in this group.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why I feel like we're trying to like move the conversation a little bit deeper because that 2 weeks basically said, so when you're working with Black people, you're going to experience this, and this, and
Mm-hmm.
this. And when you're working with Latinx community, you're going to,
Mm-hmm.
da 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 da. And it's like, that's it. Just this is the,
Right.
this is what, so every time they see a Black client, this is how they
Mm-hmm.
should treat them because
Right.
they're going to have these things. No, like that's not true and that's not fair. It's not fair at all. So,
well, yeah, because it's not like, oh, when you see people who are from the South, like if
right,
you have a client that comes in and they're from Texas,
right,
this is what you should expect. And it's
right.
like, no, I'm from Houston. That's different than if I'm from, you know.
Exactly.
You know, and I think even with the Latinx communities, like there's so many nuances. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
this big, so basically we're Latinx because we speak Spanish, right? Some of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Some,
even
I would
that's
say
an assumption.
some speak
And
French.
that's right. Well, and it's this assumption also like, oh, so you don't speak Spanish, right? Or your kids don't speak it. Like, I think that's one of those kind of like
Mm-hmm.
microaggressions.
Yep.
Like I've had to deal with that, like with my own kids. Um, it's much more difficult. Like, okay, so now at that point, they're second generation. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted them to be able to all speak fluently, right? And with my first, it was a lot easier. Like my second son was born and he had like as a mom and as a new mom, you're always paranoid. You're always like, oh my God. Well, I won't say you are. I was paranoid. You know, I want the best. My children
Right.
were so different. So the second one comes along and he's more delayed with his speech. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
taking him to a speech therapist and the speech therapist was like, well, you need to pick one language to speak to him in because he's getting confused. So my insecurities of he's about to
Mm-hmm.
start school and he's taking longer to be understood. I don't want my baby to be like misunderstood and then he's not fully, speaking English because that in and of itself, what does it mean? You go to school and you don't speak English and you're
Right.
brown and your name is,
Right.
So I was like, okay, I had to make this tough decision where I'm like speaking to him more in English because it was part of my fear of how's he going to be treated if
Right.
he's primarily speaking Spanish. But now as
Mm-hmm.
they've gotten older and they're, like, that's effort. I don't want to speak it because it's effort, like
I don't want to
they're
try.
like, yeah. So then it's like, oh, that's a shame that your children don't speak Spanish. Because there's an
Mm-hmm.
assumption that because I'm Latinx, I'm, I think it's only like with Latinx people, Mexicans. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you might be fifth generation, but you don't speak it. But other, people that come
Right.
from other
Nobody expects
countries,
fifth generation Germans to still speak German.
nobody expects Italians to still speak Italian.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, well, you're second generation, so they don't speak it as much. But for some
Yeah.
reason, they're still supposed to speak it. So then is that judgment? Like, oh, that's a shame. And it is,
Mm-hmm.
like I have my own, like, yeah, I wish they did, but they
Right.
don't. But you haven't gotten to figure out why that is because you have an assumption of how I should be raising my children.
Right, right. And how they
Based
should
on
be
who I
as
am.
Latin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna need some self-care after this conversation.
right. This
Yeah. Them
It's a
triggers
lot.
are
It can be a
triggering.
lot. For me, when that stuff happens though, usually I'm out and about because I'm just not I'm usually out and about. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me it's normally just like it ends up being a conversation with my other friends that understand it, and we all kind of commiserate and talk to each other about it and our own experiences, and that kind of helps to, that whole like not feeling alone when it comes to like having these crazy experiences. Because a lot of times when you do try to share your experiences, it's easy to get dismissed.
Absolutely.
So that's normally what I do to take care of it when that stuff does happen. Like I said, to me, this is more lighthearted. It does catch me off guard, and I have gotten heated in the past. But it is one of those things where I'm like, what the hell? And so then I just have to go talk to my friends about it, and then we kind of, just chat about our experiences.
But I do think that that's where the danger is in thinking that it's lighthearted, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's that surface stuff that it's like when we begin to dismiss that, or we begin to say, well, we're not going to have a conversation around that. And why don't we have those conversations? Because we don't want to come across as, oh, you're so sensitive. You make it all about race. Mm-hmm. And it gets kind of drowned out. The conversation gets drowned out. And so we don't have those conversations. And so then what shows up? Oh, well, there's babies in cages. Why? Because we can't have the conversations about the things that it's like, wait, so why do you think I should be speaking Spanish?
Right.
Why is that a thing? Right?
Right.
We don't have those conversations. We have them amongst ourselves.
Right.
Because we need to feel in that moment connection, right? Like that's the need that we need. I need to feel connection. I'm not feeling connected to you. That's a basic human need in order for us to feel like we're thriving. I don't feel connected to you, but I feel connected to people who can validate my experience. What would it be like if you could take a minute to get out of your own defensiveness and just to listen to what I'm saying so that I can feel connected to you?
Right.
So we can have these conversations.
Is that even an option sometimes? Like how do you create a moment where you're not basically like where it's hard as a person that's triggered to create a moment where you're not I'm trying to think of the word, like they're not saying like you're taking it too serious, so then that just causes more of an issue, and so it's always that struggle of like, when do you have the conversation and when don't you? And especially depending on the relationship. Obviously, if it's somebody that you're close to, then yes, I could probably talk to you a little bit more open about it. But if it's just like in passing, do I take the time to educate? And I've read a lot of stuff about that, like the frustration of feeling like you need to educate all the time.
Right.
Frustration of like, okay, like I always say like, well, if you just said it in a nice way, or if you just told me, if you just sat down and had a conversation with me, then I would understand. But you're not understanding that I would have to do that with every single person I've crossed paths with. Then if you trigger me, I'm not in a space to have a conversation with you right now.
So all the emotional work is on me.
Right, on me. I have to be the bigger person. I have to be calm and talk to you about it, as opposed to just being like, please don't talk to me in that manner. Or please stop talking. No, I have to explain my point of view. And it's just, so
I'm uncomfortable. My discomfort is not my discomfort is okay. Manage your discomfort, but you can't sit in your discomfort when I tell you, when you say these things, right? Like it makes me uncomfortable because what you're saying to me is you have an assumption about me based upon what I look like. Right. And I'm not fit in that. And so now you're pushing back. Right. You can't sit in that discomfort, but I can sit in the discomfort of your opinion of me, of you telling me who I'm supposed to be. Invalidating who I am is okay. But you being a little uncomfortable about a conversation when I'm like, hey, maybe like this made me uncomfortable. Right. It's like, what was it? There was a quote that, what's his name, Jesse Williams said, what was it? It's like, I'm totally going to butcher it, but it was like it's not the job of the oppressor to like it's not the job of the oppressed to make the oppressor something like that, but
or something like that. I know what you're
like
talking
that.
about.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what it is. It's like, so on top of everything that I'm dealing with, and I have to make sure I have to tend to
Feel
your
okay. I have to
emotions.
educate you. I have to be calm. I have to make sure. Yeah, yeah. I
And
have to
that
take
gets
on all of that.
exhausting.
It is very much so.
And sometimes you're just not feeling it. It's like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm not feeling it. Like, and I think sometimes, like you say, we might be a little bit, our window of tolerance may be a little
Right.
wider on certain things than others.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your last one, which I feel like both of us can kind of speak on?
Well, the police brutality, right?
Yeah.
The police brutality that summer. I won't say that it was just that one summer because it happens all the time in all seasons.
Right.
But it
Right.
seemed like that summer there was so much of it that we were getting this different kind of perspective because of people filming and it being on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook Live. And,
Mm-hmm.
that was traumatizing in and of itself. But for me, not just as a person of color, but as a mother of two brown boys. And
Right.
even within them, like my oldest is more light skinned than my youngest. And I see how he's treated just in the store, like the differences that I see in how they're treated. He could be
Mm-hmm.
doing something as simple as like kind of fumbling through the clothes rack, and the sales clerk might be really quick to
Mm-hmm.
let him know, oh honey, please don't do that, blah blah blah, when the other one
Right.
could be doing the same thing and he just kind of, so it's like, so as a
Yeah.
mother of boys, um it's terrifying to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying to me to think that, like, what could happen if they're pulled over.
Right. Right. And I think along with that is the calling of the police on
Mhm.
black people, which has
Mhm.
been I mean, I'm sure it happens a lot, but again, social
You're seeing more.
media, yeah, you're
Can't
saying
even go to the
more.
pool.
Can't go to the pool, can't go to the park, can't
Mm-mm.
sit in your dorm room, in the lobby of your dorm room, can't,
Mhm.
like, you can't, what is it, check out of an Airbnb,
Right.
like you can't do anything while being black
Yes.
or brown, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
it's
Right.
always a
Without being
question
a
of like,
suspect. Mhm.
right, it's always a question of your right to be in a certain space. Like we don't automatically have
Mhm.
a right to be in certain spaces.
Right.
Uh, and so, yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I don't have children, thank God. But, but I have friends, I have
Right.
really close male friends. And most of them have a story of being
Mhm.
pulled over, being handcuffed, being sat on the side of the road for nothing,
Right.
for literally driving from a party to their college campus or
Mhm.
just driving home from school or whatever.
Right.
Like, just the most random things, but getting pulled over and not just getting pulled over and like, oh, let me hand you your ticket because you messed up, but getting pulled over, car getting searched, all of that stuff,
Mhm.
just for the simple fact of them being black. So,
Right.
um, so to think about that and then to see how easily it is to take the life of a minority
Right.
without consequence, without thought a lot of times. It's like, oh, I wasn't thinking, oh, I was scared, oh,
Right.
da 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 da. Like it's not that big a deal to take
Right.
someone's life.
Right. You're
It is,
disposable. Like
yes, it's difficult. It's really, really
it's
difficult.
beyond difficult. It's
Yeah.
terrifying. It's
Yeah.
infuriating. It's like so much, right? That
Right.
that that just even as we're talking about it, like, we just when we started the conversation, right? And I was like, okay, well, you talk about what triggers you, we talk about what, and I'm like, just even as we've had this conversation, like I feel my own kind of,
Right.
emotions coming up.
I take
I'm
a nap
feeling
after that.
triggered just talking. I know. I'm feeling triggered just talking about what
Right.
triggers me,
Definitely.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's with us talking about this in a safe way. Like you and
Right.
I are having this, like, so, and I feel it in my throat, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
feel it. So that's what we as, you know, I can speak for myself as a brown woman, but as minorities, what we feel on a regular, and we don't always
Yeah.
feel that in safe spaces.
Right. Right. And don't want to have to have the conversation. I don't always want to have you ask me, did you see what happened? Or, or to even overhear the conversation. I had a friend, this kind of goes back to the microaggression thing. I had a friend who was at work, and it was the day after the Starbucks training, right? And her coworkers were making jokes about it, like, "Oh, did you get good customer service? Did you get to go to the bathroom without buying anything?" Like, so she's sitting there like, "Are y'all serious? Like,
right,
you don't understand? They literally called the police on somebody for sitting there, but it's a joke. It's ha ha ha. It's not that big of a deal,
right?"
And so it, as those things are happening, they're happening so often. I wish that people would be a little bit more mindful of like, yes, freedom of speech. You get to do what you want to do, blah, blah, blah. But if let's say, and God forbid, let's say you lost a child and I come in and make a joke about a child drowning, like that's
right.
It would be insensitive, right? It would make you feel, even if I didn't know, but if I did know, it would definitely be triggering and be a problem. So I think people just need to be more mindful of their surroundings. And I had a blog on Melanin Mental Health actually as well about like how to act after a crisis, like after something big has happened. And a big one is just be empathetic. Like, even you don't know what people are going through. You don't know how they're handling those things. So as opposed to trying to argue your point and talk about, what your beliefs are and what I think is this, like, can you take a moment just to recognize that something horrible has happened and not feel that as that's the space for you to go in and just fill up your timeline with all this stuff?
Because that's about your anxiety and you trying to lower your anxiety.
But in turn, you're affecting other people and not giving them the same space to be able to like, get on social media and kind of zone out sometimes. That's that's what people do sometimes. I've learned that is not what you do. Anytime anything happens, the first time I see anything on social media, that means I got to get off social media for the day because I already know that it's going to be there. I have kind of cleaned up my timeline, so that's a good thing too. Do that.
That's part of the self-care. Yes. So
do a purge.
Do a purge. Who is it that you're connecting with? And that's the thing. I think, again, as we go back to that conversation of what is self-care, this is self-care. It's not just the bubble baths and all that, but it's, we have that need for connection. We have that need for community. Where are you getting that? We have that need to be able to have a space to process all of this, like process it out loud. Like, I'm pissed off, like, or I'm scared as hell, or, survivor's guilt. Like seeing everything that's happening with those babies, I'm like, there's a certain level of guilt that comes up. It's like, well, I am in a place of privilege where I don't have to face that on the front lines. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But, I think what you're saying is like, I wish people would be more mindful. And I think the opposite is what happens, is especially as we're seeing more and more of it, people are more and more insensitive and immune.
Desensitized, yeah.
It's not, you would think be more mindful because you can see that it's happening, but it's like,
just another day.
It's like, oh, car accidents happen every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like, which again, that just speaks to absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, more and more as minorities, and bringing it back to Minority Mental Health Month, why we have to be so intentional about caring for ourselves, about caring for one another, about creating safe spaces for ourselves, for our communities, to be able to just work through the challenges of everyday life because of what you look like. Everything that brings on.
Right. And so finding ways to either be in a safe space or create a safe space for you to process or ignore or just get yourself filled up. Somebody put like, the whole, you can't pour from an empty cup. Just what do you do to rejuvenate? What do you do to get yourself back to homeostasis, right?
Where do you go to be reminded, not just internally, because so much of the work that we do is internal, but where do you go to be reminded that you matter? Where do you go to be reminded that your life is precious? Where do you go to remember I belong? I like my presence makes a positive impact in the world. I am needed. Like, where are you going to get that message?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
we all
that's
need to hear it.
important. You have to create a space where that's available and where you can do
Mm-hmm.
that. I know
Mm-hmm.
with the police brutality, um, one of the things I do is go hang out with my male friends. You
Right.
know, like I want to go see them. I want to laugh with them. I want to talk with them. I want to enjoy our time because,
I want to let them
unfortunately,
know that they're
they are
loved
loved and that
and
they're
they're
matter,
valued.
that they matter, right, and that I care about them and I'm always going to be here for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it's I don't know if it's helpful to them. I assume it's helpful, but it's helpful to
Yeah.
me as well because
Yeah.
I make sure that I'm connecting with them when I'm feeling kind of like, ugh, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, because,
yeah,
and I think it just does speak to that. It's like you kind of, we can't help but be impacted by the messages as well, even
right,
though that part of us is like, of course, this, but it's like those messages that are not just explicit, but the implicit ones
right,
that we can't help but also be affected by,
yeah,
and I know that I feel like the weight of it, like when there's so much going on in the world, I'm like, why am I feeling, the way I'm feeling
right,
today?
right,
Right?
yeah,
Like, well, because look at everything that's going on. How could we,
mm-hmm.
it's that awareness. It's the awareness of this is your experience and this is why this is happening. And then like we're saying, who are you, where do you go to just like replenish, but also just kind
Yeah,
of like, I just keep thinking like when your spirit is as broken as it is, where are you
mm-hmm.
going to just kind of recover from that?
Right, right. To reconnect and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, deep breath.
Wow. Who knew not to
Goodness.
let me lead to this last week too? We're like, oh, we're just gonna have a really quick chat.
Right, right. It gets deep real quick. This stuff is
Mm-hmm.
sensitive and ingrained and like it goes deeper than a lot of us realize.
Mm-hmm.
So we thank everybody for joining us for the conversation. We had some really
Yes,
good comments.
we did.
I
We did.
appreciate, everybody for joining. Michelle A. Dowell Vest said, be empathetic. Also make a point to not share triggering videos. I do agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Andonia said church, therapy, or somewhere naturally peaceful outside helps.
Yes,
That's a
that's
good
good.
space to
That's very
connect.
grounding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much.
Yes.
You can catch this video. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll be on melaninmentalhealth.com. It'll also be on the Facebook page if you want to watch the actual video. But we appreciate everybody for joining us for this conversation. We hope it was helpful
Yeah.
and you got something from it, maybe some tips on how you can handle those triggering moments in the future.
And how you
Um,
can be an ally, right?
and
Like
how,
how you can
yes,
be an ally
yes, and we
for
always
people of color.
appreciate allies that speak up and
Mm-hmm.
that validate our experiences because that's what
Right.
we need. Um, Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and come meet us in person if you haven't met us in person
Mm,
already. We are okay, so we're
mm.
gonna turn it, and because we can't end on this note, we
Yeah,
gotta.
right. We have all these amazing things happening.
Yes, all these things happen, and that is the beauty of our communities, though, and that's what we've been talking about is that even though throughout the history of time, we have been you know, given these situations where it's to invalidate our existence, it's
Right.
um, to say we don't matter. We take it and we flip that. We create those situations where we're having conversations like this, for example. And so part of that is how we're bringing together the community to talk about mental health in a different way. And the way we're going to do that is, when are we doing this? July what?
July 20th.
Momo's.
July 20th.
We are going to be at
Food and
Momo's.
wine.
Ooh, if you have not been to Momo's, if you are in the Houston area and you have not been to Momo's, you are missing out on some of the yummiest food in town. She has these amazing wings, and I don't even like wings. And I can't wait for those wings. But the happy hours are just an opportunity for us to come together, meet who else is in town, changing the face of therapy. It's free entry. You just responsible for your food and drink, but we
Yes.
will be there The whole crew's going to be there. Come out. Come say hi. Come hang out for a little while.
Come hang out with us. Yes. We'd love to meet you and get to know you and see you. And then we also, of course, have our shop at melaninandmentalhealth.com/shop, or just at melaninandmentalhealth.com, and there's a little shop button. We have the Therapist Need Therapy too. I just added the previous webinar, Self-Care Sexy Mug. I added the previous webinar when culture and sexuality meet in the therapy room, something like that. It is now on the shop. So if you missed that, you can go in and actually buy that webinar. And I don't know if I smiled for that picture.
I think you did. Oh, no, you didn't.
Okay.
Because you look scared.
You can go in and sorry, guys. You can go in and get that webinar if you missed the actual live webinar.
That was a great webinar.
Yeah, that was
Justin,
really good. He did a good job.
He did an awesome job.
And now he's presenting in
Birmingham, Alabama.
I was like, I think Alabama, but I don't want to lie.
Justin
Alabama
is representing. He's going to be in. He's also going to be in North Carolina soon, over right in Charlotte.
Yep, he is traveling and presenting and doing amazing things. So go check out that webinar. It's on the website. And then I think that's pretty much it. We have a new one coming about working with kids and understanding behavior issues and mental health issues. And Danielle Bowman is going to present that one, and that's coming in August 3rd, actually.
Right in time for back to school.
Yes. So we'll be promoting that soon, along with getting teachers in there to learn more about how to work with kids and recognize issues with kids and how to not over-diagnose minority kids, because that's the real one. Yes. Yes. So that's all we got. Head over to melaninandmentalhealth.com. Check out the previous podcasts, blogs, things like that. If you are a therapist and you're trying to grow your practice, go ahead and join the Melanin Mental Health Directory. We are getting tons of inquiries, as we always do. And we have options for you where you can do it monthly, you can do it quarterly, or you can do it yearly. And it's pretty cheap. I think yearly ends up being like $19 a month or something like that. So go check it out, and we can't wait to see you at the happy hour. All right?
Yay. Ciao, beautiful people.
Bye.